Welcome to Rock Docs. I am David Lizerbram here with
Andrew Keatts.
And we are joined today by a very special guest, Nick McCann of the podcast The Kept Faith. For those of our audience who are fans both of music documentaries and of regional San Diego sports, like semi-pro lacrosse, whatever, this is the podcast for you.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We should let you talk.
Yeah. No. Hey.
Welcome. So yeah, we're gonna talk about Genius, a Kanye trilogy, which is a 2022 documentary directed by Coodie, Simmons, and Chike Ozah. Probably not pronouncing that exactly right, but there you go. So yeah, Nick, anything you want to tell us before we jump in here?
Well, I just want to let everybody know that I am a big Kanye fan, and this is a really fun 3-week experience for me, and I'm really excited to talk about it with you guys. I'm a huge Rock Docs fan. Love the pod.
I think
it's really exciting to be here.
How many unofficial appearances have you made on the podcast? I think you've been referenced in the show at least two times. If I'm not mistaken.
Your season 1 recap was very touching to me. I think I showed up. I think I was mentioned about 4 times, but you guys have been nice enough.
That was the Nick McCann show.
Yeah, I love the show. I've been listening to the show since day one. I'm a day one rock.
Way back.
I'm a rock docker from way back, season 1. And I'm a firm believer that you should start a podcast with anything that you can talk to a stranger with at a wedding. And all I want to talk about is Rock Docs all the time. And this has been such a fun thing. Every time I see Andy and you, David, it's just like, I just want to, okay, let's cut the small talk. Let's talk Rock Docs. Cause that's all I can.
Well,
I feel,
spirit.
Yeah, this is a place for me. So
yeah, this is a place with no judgment, a welcoming place. No, I actually was at a wedding recently, and I had nothing to talk about with the random people at the table, and I just brought up, hey, I have a podcast about music documentaries, and it was a top, like, it covered, it got us through a half hour of that wedding. So
perfect.
There you go, Rock Docs, solving everybody's problems. Let's talk about Genius.
All right.
Genius recently came out. It was released, like Nick said, over the period of 3 weeks. I'll just kind of do a little quick. Actually, Nick, you're our guest, our very special guest. Excuse me. Why don't you give us a recap for people that haven't seen it? Just tuning in on their AM station. What is Genius?
So Genius is a 3-part, I guess 4.5-hour documentary that is filmed by Chike and Coodie. It basically tracks Kanye from when he goes to New York in about 2000 and starts, trying to sell his beats to the highest bidders and the top rappers in New York. He's a kid from Chicago, goes to New York, tries to do that. And this guy Coodie basically sees this guy's creative vision and his drive and says, I want to basically make Hoop Dreams with a rapper. And that's what we got. This follows him through this period closely. The first 2 episodes, at least, is the period when he's making his way, getting attention from Jay-Z, getting on the Blueprint, Jay-Z's probably his best album, and becoming a Rockefeller artist. And right before he basically takes over pop culture for 20 years. And you get to see him as an artist who's hungry, and you get to see the seeds of what could go wrong later. I think that's probably with the tension.
So that's parts 1 and 2.
Yeah. And then the third part starts with his mom's death, and you get to see the next 15 years or so where he becomes an example of what can happen to you if you get the attention of the world and you're not really mentally prepared for it. I think that's what it was. Yeah.
And I would say, before we get into the actual content here, in terms of like the hysteria around this, or the world around this documentary, I would say that it's reminiscent of a couple things. There's a little bit of get back here, in both the hype around it and the amount that it is a cultural phenomenon. I have had genuine water cooler conversations in my office about Genius since it came out. Multiple different people. So yeah, you've got the old prestige HBO TV effect of a multi-part series here. You also have the sort of creative license of what you can do once you've decided to go long, which we saw in Get Back and which we've seen in some other documentaries. But then there's also the element. There aren't that many rock docs that fall in this one. Is the Hoop Dreams angle of seeing somebody when they are not famous and deciding that is the right time to turn the camera on them and to, in Coodie's case, make a bet that his impulse that Kanye was special would be right and that the footage would be worth something because of that. Whereas Hoop Dreams kind of it turned out a little bit more like the Brian Jonestown massacre, where the basketball players from Hoop Dreams did not turn into household names on the basketball court, but it didn't really matter. You could still make them into a good documentary anyway. And Dig sort of fell that way. Neither the Dandy Warhols nor Brian Jonestown massacre became massive stars, but that didn't preclude it from being a good movie. So this one, it's sort of touches on a bunch of different templates for rock docs, so I don't know. There's a little foregrounding.
Yeah. I think the first thing to talk about is Coodie himself.
Yeah.
So Coodie is like in the late '90s. He's a stand-up comedian in Chicago. Just kind of early 20s, just trying to make it. He gets this local TV show called Channel Zero, where they just covered rap, hip hop related topics. And that's how he came to be. In the very beginning of this movie, we see, he's at Jermaine Dupri's birthday party in 1998 or whatever, and talking to people, and they're like, "Hey, you got to meet this guy Kanye. He's this kid who's like making beats," and Kanye is like 18 or something at the time, and there's just kind of this immediate connection. Then you basically skip forward to about 2000, and Kanye decides to move to New York to try to make his fortune. And shortly thereafter, Coodie also just moves to New York just to follow Kanye around. It's never explained how Coodie is supporting himself. Like Kanye is at this point is a successful producer, but he's not like making a ton of money,
right?
And it's not really clear whether this Coodie is like on Kanye's payroll at this point. But that's not really, but one way or the other, they're just following each other and they're very close. One of the main themes of the movie is just the thrust of their friendship. How Coodie sees Kanye as like a brother, like a friend. Kanye, it sometimes seems to feel that way, sometimes doesn't. Basically cuts him off after he becomes super famous. And then the third part is really just like how Coodie dips in and out of Kanye's life every few years. And you just see these glimpses of this person as he as he progresses, along the lines of the public, persona that he's become.
Yeah, I think I've gathered from some interviews that maybe Coodie was still doing Channel Zero during the early years of this documentary. And so I don't know, Nick, you're a bigger hip hop fan than either of us. Were you aware of Channel Zero? Is that something you know about?
Absolutely no, absolutely not. I mean, he's basically doing like a Chicago hip hop Wayne's World, and I didn't.
Yes,
that wasn't on my radar. I mean, I think to me it read like Kanye moves to New York. He's clearly the most talented producer in Chicago at the time, and he goes to New York, gets some attention from Jay-Z and Rockefeller, or just starts selling beats to or using beats with Mos Def and Talib Kweli, who really seemed to understand his genius at the beginning. And basically all of his friends from Chicago just moved out to his apartment. That was my reading of it, but I don't, and good for them. I love Jay Ivy and all the guys from Chicago. It's
Rhyme Fest.
Yeah. I think what you're seeing, what I'm so fascinated with at that period in the documentary and just in New York at the time is there is this open seat after Biggie's death where Jay-Z is ascending to take it, and basically everybody would say that the Blueprint, which is the album that Kanye really breaks through on, and he has the Ozah song, and I think Heart of the City is the other one, and helps Jay-Z really take the throne of the most important MC in New York. And Rockefeller Records is the biggest boutique label in the city. So I don't know. I don't know what Coodie's intentions were. It seems like he stumbled onto a really talented person with charisma and just went for it. He probably wanted to just be in New York, though. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it does. Coodie does, I think, undeniably deserve quite a bit of credit for being able to look out and just see that this guy Kanye was, a cut above the types of musicians he was otherwise dealing with. That said, and maybe the first part of this movie, basically the whole first episode, it is surreal to see now how little respect Kanye gets as a rapper from everybody at Rockefeller Records. Coodie clearly sees Kanye as a genius. Kanye clearly sees Kanye as a genius.
Yep.
And Mos Def and Talib Kweli clearly see Kanye as a genius.
And just to clarify, Kanye is already an established producer, but he wants to be a rapper. And at that time, that was like a crossover that was like really hard to make. It would be from it was like George Clooney went from being a TV star to being a movie star, but like nobody else did that. So Dr. Dre was a producer and a rapper, but he wasn't. He never was known as a rapper in the same way.
Never aspired to be a rapper.
Kanye had already been like in some cases incredibly successful as a producer. But the transition he was trying to make just seemed ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, you see it when in one of there's so many moments in this documentary that are like, oh my God, moments where you're like, that's just a great rock doc moment, And the one where he's in that crowded hallway and one of the junior executives or somebody from, I think it's an A&R guy from Rockefeller Records says, "Oh man, you're like the best rapping producer." And he gets so offended by that. And you see this, Kanye is so worried about being a producer who raps. He doesn't want to be that. He wants to be a rapper who makes his own beats. And that dichotomy is what he's obsessed with in those years. He cannot be accepted in that way. And I think who's interesting, you guys had talked about it in the iconic episode in season 1 of Doc Rocks for the Tribe Called Quest. I think Q-Tip is an example of this, where he's making all the music basically. It's his ideas of the beats,
right?
But he's presented as the lead MC, and so he never struggles with this at all. Like, we never really think of Q-Tip as being a producer who tried to rap. He's always presented as that. I think Kanye really wanted that kind of career, and his beats were just so jaw dropping, I think, at that time, and so new. It was so exciting that you can see it on Kweli and Mos Def's faces when they hear his songs. It's just, he was something new, and they didn't really have time to accept his flow, which was different at the time. Nobody had really broken from Chicago, which is, he has a Chicago accent, and nobody really had heard that before. So.
Yeah, and he's sort of consciously talking about that, and they pull some old archival footage from Channel Zero with like DeBrat talking about how no one from Chicago gets any credit, and there's like two moments really stick out to me from this first part. One is, I mean, just will go down in Rock Doc Hall of Fame, is when Kanye decides he's going to storm the Rockefeller offices with Coodie coming behind him with a camera, and he just starts playing. He's got Jesus Walks already. It's like, it's not like, oh man, it's weird that they couldn't hear the greatness in these early tracks where you can already, in hindsight, see what he had working with that they should have been able to identify and help build up. He already has the song that will go on to be like the biggest song in the world, and they're listening to that finished song, that fully produced, completed song, and like they can't even be bothered to look up from their computers. They're so annoyed by him. They couldn't be more dismissive. He's like,
right. He's just playing this for random people in the office.
And,
you know, it's not like the top executives. It's anybody.
And they're like, most of their feedback is like, yo, can you turn that down? Like, or
it reminded me of the stories of like the Beatles being turned down by every record company. You know what I mean? It's like that kind of thing, except you have it on film.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You have the people unable to recognize an undeniable talent right in front of them. You know, this is the only example. Like, you know, tons of rock docs have this story of like, oh, we went to every record label, nobody would assign us, nobody. But like to actually see that happen, on tape is unique.
Andy, you work in a newsroom. If you had a freelancer who wrote like 2 good stories, and you guys hadn't hired him full time or whatever, and they just came into your office and started reading these other stories that they had written. I mean, like the look on your faces would be pretty comparable to that. I think, like, I don't know. He's in the door. They're like not surprised to see him. He's allowed in the building.
Yeah. They all know his name.
And he
There's
just takes this. He takes the swing where it's like
the best part of it.
Remember the scene? Yeah.
Well, when he goes, he's like literally at the front door. He knocks first and then just stands there and stares at the door and realizes that no one's going to come and get the door. So he has to go open it. It's like this really like social anxiety moment of somebody who's like decided to go confront someone, but doesn't know exactly how to do it.
Yeah. Well, there's a scene where like he's playing it for one of the interns and the girl just basically tells him to turn it off. And you see this face on him that you don't see from Kanye, because now he's so validated as an artist and he's a worldwide superstar. But you see this kid who's like, oh, that didn't work, huh? It just kind of looks so dead inside. And yeah, that's an all-timer for me. I mean, that was probably the hook, I think, when I saw that in the first episode. Oh, unbelievable.
But so like that early moment it's juxtaposed against other parts where like there's a moment where he's sitting in his car with Talib Kweli and he's just playing him beats. These aren't his songs. He's not playing them. Jesus Walks, but Kweli's like thrilled by everything he hears. He's just oh shit, let me get that. And Mos Def is on the sidewalk listening to it, and Mos Def's like pacing with the excitement of somebody who's like realizing he's got his hands on some absolute gold here. So in terms of people who come off looking really good, like they had taste that they don't have to apologize for 20 years later. Talib Kweli and Mos Def clearly recognized who they were dealing with. Also at that time, there's like they hook him up with the A&R guy at their label, Raucous Records. And that dude's explanation of where Kanye fits into the rap world is like exactly perfect. Like 3 years later, his description on the street to Kanye about why Kanye is special could have just been like a piece of rock writing that appeared in Rolling Stone that helped explain why Kanye broke so big.
Right, you're like between the street guys and the like kind of backpack intellectual rapper types, and like he totally got it.
Yes, he sees right through it, and he's just like, yeah, this is why you're going to be special. It's incredible.
Yeah, and I think like as a Nick, I know you're a big you're the resident Kanye head.
Yeah.
And more of a hip hop fan. I mean, I followed hip hop pretty closely in the 90s. And then I got old. The Y2K bug got to me. And I kind of clocked out a little bit. Just being interested in other things, and I kind of regret that in a way, because like I listen to new stuff sometimes and I like it, but I'm like not immersed in the culture enough to get all the value out of it that I think is there. But really I did follow Kanye probably for the first, 5 albums or something really closely. Through probably My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and Yeezus. So like well after this movie, the first couple parts of this movie. But I think obviously everybody knows who this person is, and you see him on TV. And I knew when an album came out by him, but I wasn't really paying that much attention. I didn't necessarily check out his, last whatever few albums. And so I was kind of like, okay, where is Kanye like in terms of like all-timers? And you just look him up on Wikipedia, doing a serious deep dive of research here, and it's like you kind of forget, or at least if you're not immersed in the culture in that way, like I had forgotten, like, it's like every record of like, since the streaming era of music, the last 10, 15 years, he's like, in the top level of every single possible category, most downloaded, most this,
Even the
9 consecutive #1 records. It's like the guy is a absolute colossus, and has is like a Hall of Famer in terms of like record sales, even in the the current age, and he never really went away. And so I think at if you're coming into this now and not a big hip hop head, you might just think like, well, yeah, he had some success at some point, and then he just became like a celebrity, like a Kardashian essentially. But he's really kept doing it at a very high level. Maybe not every album is a classic, but he's success commercially, he's kept on hitting grand slams one after the other for like 20 years at this point.
I mean, I think from College Dropout to Life of Pablo, I think that run is, I don't know who has a better body of work than that, really. Like, I don't know what you're looking at if you're saying, I mean, I think the Tribe albums, the first 3 are pretty great and up there for me, but I just don't, to me, I look at him as more of like I think he's rap's David Bowie. I think he's like that. Like, he's that important to hip hop. I think that's, he takes everything before him and processes it and makes it completely new and challenging, and it's different every time. His albums have different shades to it, which is really exciting. I always thought it was exciting, but it's hard now. It's tough.
well, here's a question. Here's a question for you that I've been tossing around in my head for the last 3 weeks. Is so after Life of Pablo, his records stop getting critical acclaim. For the most part, there's always a critic somewhere who's like, nope, still an absolute genius. But like Donda, not many people seem to have liked that record very much, which didn't stop every song on it from getting like 200 million streams.
Yeah.
If you happen to go check it out on Spotify, it's still like more successful than anything on that service. But what I wonder is this going to be like just ripe for a critical reappreciation in 10 or 15 years? Like
Joker Men style.
Yeah, exactly. That was exactly where I was going to go. Is that like Dylan falls out of favor with the critical establishment in the late 70s, early 80s, and then he keeps making music. He keeps touring. He produces an obscene number of records, and go find a record store nerd or go find a Dylan head. Though there are no shortage of people who will tell you that, including one of my friend and co-host on this program, who will tell you that like
at great length,
it will tell you at great length that some of these like old 80s records that no one has given much thought to is actually like the best thing he ever did, or that like his live career was actually at its best in the early 2000s. And so I
all true.
Like, I wonder if that's where Kanye's going, that he's had this fallow period where he's almost more famous for being on a reality TV show and a tabloid celebrity. But just wait 10 or 15 years and people will be like, oh, what he was doing there is where music was going, and we weren't ready for it.
Yeah, I think they're gonna. I could definitely see a lot of criticism in 20 years or revisiting of like Jesus is King, and people just being like, oh, you guys we didn't get it at the time. He needed to put Kenny G on that track. Like that's what he. I couldn't get into that one. There's a few moments in it. The Donda one I couldn't even get through. I don't. I'm really out after the Wyoming sessions where he goes to Wyoming, which I thought in the 3rd episode, or when they were showing some of the sessions for that for Kids See Ghosts.
Yeah,
with Kid Cudi.
And
that was
Bieber.
Extraordinary stuff. Yeah. I like that stuff. I'm pretty much out after that. It just doesn't feel healthy to support this. I don't know.
Yeah. We'll have to get into that at some point, but let's table that for a second. Let's get back to this.
I mean, Coodie and Chike could keep this going. I mean, why does this have to stop? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, so these guys had like 330 hours of footage
give it to me.
I mean, yeah.
Nick will be the Peter Jackson
Yeah.
of Kanye.
Yeah. Edit it together, do some creative filmmaking, but a 330-hour film would be ideal.
Give me 45 minutes on him defending autotune in like 2009. That's what I want.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So I mean, this is 4.5 hours, and it is packed full of moments. I don't think we can go through everything. I mean, broadly speaking, the arc of it is at the end of the first segment, he gets signed finally to Rockefeller Records as a rapper, which is like his kind of first goal. Then the second segment starts. He's gotten signed, and he's trying to kind of put his album together, and then he gets into this terrible car accident where his face was just completely smashed up. His jaw was broken. He had to have all this jaw surgery, which is documented in some detail in the movie. He uses that problem, that issue to create what became his first big hit song, Through the Wire, where he's like literally rapping through his like through the wired up teeth, and then you see him struggling then for a lot of the next episode to get to even record his album. Like Rockefeller signed him as a rapper, and then just like wouldn't even give him studio time or the money to make an album, to make a video for Jesus Walks, or for Through the Wire, etc. And eventually, like, no spoiler here, at the end of the second episode is when he breaks through. His first album, The College Dropout, finally comes out, and it's like the biggest thing that ever happened. And he wins like every Grammy. He wins like Best Female Country Artist or something. I mean, like they're inventing categories for the guy, and he's just on top of the world. So that's the second segment, and the third segment is, like you said, it's less intimate in a way, because you just get these kind of drop-ins. But I want to talk about probably who I think is the star of this, or the person who stands out the most, which is Donda.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Just Kanye's mom is. I'm gonna, in true Kanye fashion, I'm gonna let you finish, Nick. But
I'm gonna let you
yeah. No, I mean, we previously on this season of Rock Docs, we watched the Billie Eilish documentary, which I referred to as a parenting guide, because her relationship with her parents was just so wonderful. And I do feel the same way about this in terms of Donda, Kanye's mom, just a absolutely tremendous person. You can tell that she is so incredibly proud and loving of her son, at exactly the same amount when he's like a struggling 20-year-old college dropout trying to make it as a musician, as when he's the biggest star in the world. Like, there is no difference in terms of her just being thrilled every moment that she is in his presence. And it's a blessing to have her, like so much of her in this movie. And it's such a tragedy when, what's going to happen, but when, around 2007, when she passes away, and you could tell how that affected Coodie as well. I mean, I have to assume you guys agree with me that she's the standout in this whole movie.
Without question. I mean, we talk about moments in Rock Docs a lot. There's moments that are sort of like stirring musical moments where you get to see the guys break Get Back for the first time. There's funny moments where like you can't believe some passive aggressive comment that somebody made, or shocking moments where there's a fight that occurs on camera. The Donda moments, and I do think I mean just about every time she's on screen in this movie, are in a totally different class of just these like poignant, heartfelt moments where at least for me, I couldn't help but like sort of, if I was fiddling with something, stopping what I was fiddling with. If I was drinking a beer, putting it to the side. It is transfixing to watch the two of them speak to one another. They're so dialed in. She communicates with him and puts him at ease in a way that he's otherwise never at ease at any moment that we see him, even when he's just with his friends or in the studio. There, he is like a different person around her, and it's sort of surreal to watch their relationship. And I without it ever needing to be said, although it's obvious, it makes it quite easy to understand why his life went the direction that it went after she died.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's I, as a person who's always consumed his music and picked it apart pretty much from the beginning and all the way to now, it's hard to watch. You really, really see why she was such a grounding force in his life. And yeah, like you just said, it's just, you can totally see why he could spiral and has pretty much not recovered from her death. I think that's something that is pretty obvious now. And yeah, she's so winning in this movie. Like she lights up the screen. She's so positive, and she never seems to treat his passion as something that it could be destructive to him. She just supports him and says, you are the only one. You should be the one to do this, and you can go forward, and I support you in every way. It's really a beautiful thing to watch, and you see this other side of Kanye that we'll probably never see again. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen to that dude. And this is, it's amazing to see the footage that he had.
The amount of thought he puts, the sort of silence he falls into and lets himself turn it over in his head when she tells him that a giant looks in the mirror and sees nothing, is it's it. I don't know. I don't know how you watch that without smiling a little bit. But likewise, it's also just a sweet and familiar parental interaction when she says it's all good. And he just covers his face and is like, "Mom, that is so old. You can't say that anymore. You can't say it's all good." Which is unfortunate because that's like 20 years ago, and I still say that sometimes.
I had this experience. I rewatched it this last weekend, and I had this experience. I think in the second episode, before she has that moment where she explains to him the giant thing, Coodie and Chike are using footage from the cartoon, the Gulliver's Travel cartoon.
Yes.
And I remember I was thinking he's doing something on screen, and I remember thinking like, oh, come on, Coodie, what is this? You guys are splicing that in? I get it. That's a little heavy handed. And then he shows you the conversation that she has with them. And I was like, man, you guys are filmmakers, man. You guys are really doing this. I don't know. It was, it really worked. I rolled my eyes with the animation, and then I was like, oh, I get it now. And that's,
and
great.
Donda. Yeah. I mean, just a shout out to her. I mean, her job in life was not just to be Kanye's mom. I mean, she did a lot of great stuff. I mean, she and her, I think, then husband at the time, or maybe a boyfriend, were at one of the first lunch counter sit-ins in the very early part of the civil rights movement. When this is like putting your life on the line. She went on to get a PhD and became a professor of English. She taught, in Japan. I mean, this is a person who was really, having a broad intellectual life and also a family. I mean, you see her with her sister, Kanye's aunt. At one point, you could tell there's like a warm family relationship. There's like an old video clip they show of Kanye when he was like 10 or something like that. Kind of like rapping as a little kid. I mean, so you see they're surrounded by this whole family unit. And you can see the way that she embraced Coodie and the other people that Kanye would just bring in the house. She never said like, why are you bringing these people around my house or whatever. It was just like warmth and love to everybody. And so just, I mean, I feel fortunate that I got to watch this movie just to experience a little bit of her.
Well, and with watching what has happened to him in the last 15 years, it's interesting juxtaposed against one of the standout moments, I think, in the first section, when he has this feud with his friend and a local Chicago rapper, Doug Infinite, where they're at like a rap convention and they're all getting lunch in the cafeteria, and they get Doug Infinite on stage on screen for some kind of standard fare, telling the story about how he helped teach Kanye how to make beats in the early days and how they go way back. And then Kanye gets in the car and hears Doug Infinite on the radio talking trash about him, and I guess he has like a diss track about Kanye taking too much credit or not being sufficiently deferential to some of the older guys in Chicago. And they go confront him like that day. They and it's all on camera. And early on, he's like on the phone explaining what's going on to somebody, and you only hear one side of the conversation, but whatever the other person says, Kanye responds to it like so dismissive. He's like, no, this isn't that street shit. This is like my friend. I know him. We're talking. And they have this very mature situation where they hear each other out, and then they hug it out, and then they go their separate ways. They're clearly both still upset with each other. But it demonstrates like sort of social skills and problem solving that would be sorely needed in his current moment with Pete Davidson or whoever it is he's feuding with by the time this episode drops in a couple weeks.
Yeah, it'll be somebody else.
Well, I remember in that meeting, in that conference where they're talking to Doug Infinite, and he's before the whole falling out or the confrontation happens, and you meet Doug Infinite. He's talking about how he knew Donda West, and she basically told him like, Kanye needs to be involved with whatever you guys are doing. He's interested in rap. Can you guys include him? And it was like, that's how it's going to be. And we all respected her, so we did that. And that's another just beautiful moment too. I thought that was extraordinary.
Yeah, that's pretty prescient to be able to say like, oh, my teenage son is like needs something productive to do. Here are some local rappers. You know, this is probably the early 90s, you know, may not have been what every parent thought their kid should be doing. And yeah, it certainly was the right move.
Yeah. I mean, there's stories of Kanye before he started making beats, like hip hop beats. He was making his own hypersexualized like video games with video game. He was making his own video game music. So maybe his mom was like, maybe I should set him up with some real rappers and we can like stop doing that. So I don't know. Like there's just like, he's just a weirdo, you know? And
well, then he made My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. So, you know, it all came around. I mean, that's one thing you don't really get in this documentary is you don't get you get like no drug use.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you see somebody smoking weed, but rarely. You get no like
no partying. There's no in the club partying or anything like that.
No, there's no in the club partying. There's no like Kanye is not known for being a celibate person. But other than a scene of him buying a porno off of some guy at Times Square,
for the shockingly high price of $8.
Just
$8.
Another great moment. Another great moment.
Yeah. But other than that, you get nothing about his, sex life or romantic. Like occasionally you see like a girl near him, like must be a girlfriend or something. But like there's none of that. Like that's not what this. I mean, if you got 300 hours of footage of this 20-year-old Kanye, there's got to be some of him partying or being with girls or something. Yeah. But that's just not. Somehow that was all edited out.
No,
not included.
To the 5 hours that we see here in this movie, basically all he does is make music and maniacally chase what he needs to get that music to the largest audience possible. That's basically his entire life.
Yeah.
But you don't. Another thing is I noticed is like you don't really get a lot of the making of music, especially in the early parts, which I feel like they have to have that. But there's a lot of Kanye on the street, like just banging down doors. There's not a lot of him. Like you never get a scene of him, which I expected to see, like trying a few samples till he finds the right sample for whatever, or trying a few beats, or like there's some of him working out verses. And then later on in the third part, when contemporary, basically the last few years, you get some in the studio stuff of him like just trying out beats and trying different sounds. But I gotta imagine there's more of him putting those first few albums together that you don't quite see.
Yeah, and I wonder if some of that, and we could talk about this, is how much of that has anything to do with Kanye's involvement in the project. Maybe he wanted to keep the mystique of him as the singular genius who just knows how it's supposed to go. He doesn't want to show anybody the process of all the elbow grease he puts into it. Because there. So when this series dropped, there was a Kanye Instagram post where he demanded of Netflix to have the right of a final cut over this project. And I think that sort of gave the impression that he was in some way at odds with Coodie and Chike or with this project in general. But I think the right way to look at it as a whole is that, I mean, him and Coodie and Chike were collaborators in every sense of the term throughout this early part of his career. Especially, they did the Jesus Walks video, they did a lot of his other videos, they did tour videos, they were on, for comedians that toured with him. They were part of his crew, and they were part of the artistic world that was around him. There's multiple times where he asks them for footage for something he's putting together for something else, or for some other video, or for some documentary or something. And
Donda calls on them to do a video for her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So there's no professional distance between them, really. Now, Coodie and Chike have said that that it was very important to them that they have the final say here. But I don't they're not trying to suggest that they're anything other than very close personal friends with Kanye, who were happy to be involved in his career, and that this, that he was a major player in this project, not just the subject of this project. And so whether I have no idea whether he said he didn't want the making of his tracks in this. But that's one thing that you could potentially guess, and I think that maybe that's a way in for us to talk about how concerning it is, or if it's at all concerning, that this is sort of a project by the subject.
Well, I mean, I wonder. I'm very interested to see what it would look like to watch him make beats. I'm interested in that, but I wonder if Kanye's biggest fear about being perceived as a beat maker was something that Coodie and Chike also feared in their own way, where they didn't think it was cinematically interesting to watch somebody program beats. I mean, maybe it's more interesting to watch the vocal part of it, and he just shows up with these beats. I don't know. I think that's
there is the part.
I mean, he's a digital beat maker, so it's
yeah. There is the part of him working out his rap on the on a Jay-Z track.
Yeah, which is just unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's not doing it quite right at first, and Jay-Z looks bored and unimpressed. And then eventually he does enough that intrigues Jay-Z, and Jay-Z starts giving him tips. And there's like this moment where Kanye sees that Jay-Z likes it, and he gets really stoked. He like reaches out and taps Jay-Z on the chest. That whole thing, there's a bit of a making of component to that, I think, and man, that's really good footage.
Well, so many of the big moments are when they're showing him reveal his songs to these bigger named artists. I think one of the great moments in the film is, which I just could not stop thinking about, is when he has Scarface come to Scarface comes to the studio, and Kanye makes the decision to wear a Nolan Ryan jersey. And I just was thinking, is he wearing that because he wants to win over one of the greatest lyricists in the history of hip hop? Scarface is great, and
from Houston.
Yep. Ghetto Boys, Mind Is Playing Tricks on Me. I mean, he wrote that for real. So did Kanye decide, I'm going to wear this jersey? Will this help him accept my rapping? I don't know. I love those moments, in the Pharrell moment where he's showing his stuff. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, there's a moment where he plays Through the Wire for Pharrell when, before College Dropout comes out, and he's in the studio. He's like, let me play this for you. He plays the song Through the Wire, and Pharrell, who's already like this superstar producer, rap, whatever, like, he literally in the middle of the song gets up and walks out the door and down the hallway. Like, he's so blown away that he's like, I can't even handle this. Like, it was so, he's like, wow, you know what I mean? It would be like somebody encountering Pharrell. You know what I mean? It's like genius meeting genius.
Yeah, and 5 years later, Pharrell's band is opening the Glow in the Dark tour. I mean, that's what happened.
Right. Yeah. And Pharrell just gives him, really good advice, about staying hungry, in a way that comes through, because the words might sound like platitudes, but just the person who's giving it and in that position, I think really, it's in the movie because it's impactful. there's so many great moments in this movie of just like, people realizing Kanye's genius.
Yeah.
It's one after the other, and he knows it all along, but yet you still see the awkwardness and the the kind of challenges that he goes through, and the perseverance.
And-
which, like, if you are like a hustle bro, this is the movie for you.
Yes.
Like, if
That's
you
true.
are like watching, TikToks about how you got to strive and grind and work, like 24/7, bro, to get that Lambo or whatever, then like this movie's just gonna inspire you to like just but
Like I was right.
whatever.
I was right about
buy
all
more
that
NFTs,
stuff.
whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah.
You are gonna be fired up.
Well, because he never shakes the chip off his shoulder. Like
Oh no, he still hasn't. He hasn't.
Yeah. There's no point where
day.
he's like, I said I was a genius, and now everyone realizes it. It's like he just ups the level that he sees himself that no one quite sees him on yet, until right to the point that he's screaming in one TV interview, like, I already told you, I think I'm a god. There's no one could possibly ever like him as much enough that it's that they like him the right amount.
That's why he sympathizes or connects with Trump, right? I mean,
I think that's right.
I mean, he Trump, no matter what, nothing would ever be good enough for that guy. Like, okay, you got elected president, chill out, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you won. Like, now go like be magnanimous or care about somebody else. No, that's not in the DNA. And yeah, I mean, that's why there's a connection there. That's the evil side of Kanye.
Yeah, well, I think, with Kanye, I think the most interesting stuff he does is he takes the hip hop form, which is the MC gets the mic and says how great he is, right?
Yeah.
That's like that's what the art form is at its core. He takes you inside the brain of somebody who really, really believes he's the greatest thing that's ever happened. And it's dark and it's scary and it's interesting. And, I think that's what sets him apart. It set him apart in 2004, and it has pretty much until now. I'm not really interested in other rappers. Like, I don't know they're not saying anything like that. Like, they're not showing you the broken side of their brains like that.
And at one point, Kanye says, like, I believe I'm a god, I'm a genius, I'm the greatest. He's like, you should believe that too about yourself. Like, it's not like he thinks, it's opposed to anybody else. It's like he doesn't understand why everybody else doesn't feel that way about themselves and shouldn't be trying just as hard to achieve their goals.
He articulates some version of this idea like 7 or 8 times in this movie. The best one, in my opinion, the absolute best one, is when he says that, like, if somebody comes up to him on the street and tells him that they love his music, he's like, what am I supposed to do? Go, oh, well, thanks. I really appreciate that. It's so nice of you. He's like, no, if you say that, I think that means you have great taste, and I want to compliment you because you like the best thing. It's like such an insane way to think, but it's actually a perfectly coherent logic that he's like, I think I'm the greatest. And so if you tell me that you like me, I will inherently think you're smarter because that's the right opinion.
We agree about something.
He's it's amazing. I think that's his staying power. Like, he just never wavers from that. So
before we depart here, when he's like on the verge of getting there's 2 moments we should jump on the verge of getting very famous. One is him at Denny's, him and Coodie and the guys at Denny's.
Oh yeah, hell yeah!
What an order!
Hell yeah!
What an order!
Yeah.
Now, his teeth are all messed up at the time.
Yes.
So just bear that in mind.
What was his order? Do you recall?
It's like,
did you guys, anybody have it written down?
Isn't it a chili cheese thing or something?
Oh yeah. Oh,
like
that's right. He orders chili cheese fries, and he's like, extra chili. Damn it! I gotta look it up. Damn it.
It's phenomenal.
But yes,
I know what you're
but
talking
he ends up screwing around with like these UCLA students that are there studying, and the crew starts telling him how famous the other guy's going to be, and they're like, well, we believe you, but like we have to study. And they're like, yeah, no, but seriously, he's going to be really, really, really famous. And they're like, I get it, but like, my physics test is tomorrow regardless. It just goes on like that for a very long time.
I want to kind of, get into the third section of the movie, which is like, been kind of controversial, let's just say.
Hold on,
and,
I've got the order. Here's his
okay,
diner
hold
order.
on. We're back with the Denny's order.
Cheese fries with the Cajun fries under the cheese, but a lot of cheese, like more cheese than usual, and mashed potatoes with the country gravy. That's his order.
That's awesome.
Which, yeah, if your teeth are all messed up and you can't really chew,
You need like mushy shit.
you want more. You want more cheese than usual.
Yeah.
What an alpha!
Like,
what an alpha!
Like more cheese than usual.
Yeah.
Okay, so the third part of this documentary is probably the most controversial, most different. I mean, it's almost like the parts 1 and 2 are sort of like one movie, and then the third part is in some sense a very different movie. It looks different, like the video quality is different because you're filming in HD rather than like a Best Buy camera
Right.
from 2000. And again, you're not getting this intimate portrait of Kanye like moment by moment. It's just like dips in, and then a few years will go by, and you'll get something else. And meanwhile, Coodie is telling a lot more about himself. I mean, you see his premature daughter, in the hospital, like when she's born. Fortunately, she goes on to be totally fine. So you see him with his family. You see him at the last time that he sees his father before his father passes away. Talks a lot about just his own life and what was going on during this time. So it almost becomes equally as much about Coodie as Kanye. But yeah, I mean, that third piece is really, I mean, you could definitely look at it as like the descent of somebody. I mean, just Kanye is, having issues with bipolar disorder, various other problems. There's several times where Kanye just goes off on a rant where eventually Coodie just cuts off the camera, and he says in the narration, like, I turned off the camera because I didn't think it was right to record this. Like, or I didn't feel comfortable having my friend, like my brother, being exposed this way. And he still puts it in the movie. So, it's not like he's so respectful that he's not going to show it, but there's a lot. Coodie speaks very plainly about the hesitancy he has about showing what he's showing, and about his feelings about what's going to happen to Kanye, like all right up to the present moment. Nick, what do you think about the like third piece? I mean, I just wanted to get your take in terms of like, when the first time that all three of us watched it, we were like texting together, and it was like you thought he didn't stick the landing.
No, yeah,
I really we all felt that way, and now I think maybe we've all kind of come around.
The first time I watched it, I was like, "We're getting a lot of Coodie here," and he clearly doesn't. I didn't realize he didn't. The first time I received it as like he didn't have the level of footage that he had in the first 2 episodes, and he's definitely distant. He talks about it in the documentary that he's been pushed away, and yeah, but watching it again, I guess you could cut some stuff of his personal life, but I think it works overall to show like somebody he's ultimately a fan of Kanye, the artist, and that's kind of our way into the movie. And I've grown up listening to Kanye. I've had a child while being a fan of Kanye. So I received it differently the second time. I don't know why the second time hit for me better, but there's just so many great moments in that, or fascinating moments. I wonder if he made a lot of decisions based on the fact that most people that are going to watch this documentary know what a Kanye rant looks like. So I could cut it off before like when he's in the Dominican with those investors, and he's talking about, I need a translator because I'm an alien or whatever he's saying. And Coodie cuts it off. It's like, for people that have been following Kanye, I mean, following pop culture generally, we know what a Kanye rant looks like, and maybe we don't need to see it, the whole thing.
Yeah.
But, I thought it really worked the second time. I don't know why, but I see it as I think it works as a full piece now.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
I do too. And I think, and I don't know if Coodie thought of it this way, but part of the reason it works for me is like, what's the angle or what's the approach to go about these last 15 years of Kanye being maybe the most overexposed person in the world? The only person who would really compete with him for that title is his wife, or the ex-president, or the ex-president that he has this like weird, sort of crossing paths, bromance with. I mean, those are like the three people, and it's all played out publicly. So how do you do it? How do you go about a story that played out mostly in public that you weren't there for, and bring it along to add something and say something? And centering it on Coodie's friendship with him and the way he was sort of came in and out of his life at this point is actually a really good way, I think, to sort of center it as a person going through a pretty horrible time, and not this sort of media phenomenon that we've all seen. Although I will say that I had forgotten a lot of what happened to Kanye over the last 10 years. Like,
It's a lot.
I would have thought I
Yeah.
remembered it all.
Yeah.
And then as I'm watching it, I'm like, oh my God, that's right. He was like institutionalized. I had forgot that he was forcibly institutionalized. I had forgotten a lot of this stuff because at some point it became such a spectacle and it was so detached from him as an artist, like the thing I liked about him, that I just totally checked out. And so somewhere along that line, I sort of stopped absorbing this news. And so it comes through rapid fire, and it's like, oh my God, that's right. I completely forgot about basically all of this information.
I mean, imagine a movie where you're talking about somebody who was married for like many years to Kim Kardashian, and she's not mentioned.
Yeah.
And it's not even relevant. Like, there's so many other things that happen
Yeah.
to this person that's not the most interesting or compelling thing or like, newsworthy thing that happens to this person.
Well,
If
I think the most fascinating scene at the very end of the movie, I think it's what the film is kind of building to, is you see this completely spiraling human being who's wanted attention his whole life, and he's driving shotgun in a car on his phone watching a news broadcast where they're talking about him based on him tweeting something or saying something into his phone. And he seems like a real normal person who's just going through this experience that is insane. And I think a lot of what Coodie talks about and the movie talks about is that people that are fans of Kanye always want the old Kanye to come back. And you realize that this is the same person the whole time, that he just wanted validation. He wanted attention, and he finally gets it. And this is what it looks like when you get what you want at that level. And it's just amazing that he got that footage. I don't know.
It's charming that when you're
Yeah.
20 and you're hustling and you want attention and you want validation, and we know what a talent this person is, and we know he's going to get it. It's like endearing. But when you're 45 and you're a billionaire who's married to a Kardashian and has won every Grammy and every award in the world and is like hanging out with presidents Obama and Trump, like that is it's like something that a little kid does is cute, but when they're an adult, it's like, all right, knock it off already, dude.
Well, I think that's the connection with Trump, is that these two guys can actually just tweet something from the palm of their hand, and people will write think pieces about it. They will talk about it on national television, and he's spiraling probably in a manic episode or something, but he's delighted by it, the power that he has, that he can just set media agendas for the day. Tucker Carlson is talking about me.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy, guys? And he's like looking at the camera, it's
yeah. I mean, this movie really made me think about like personal responsibility in the sense of like, I mean, we know that Kanye has talked about how he's been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and God knows what else. I mean, it's like, it's easy to just attack the guy for something he says, because he says many things, including in this movie, that I personally don't agree with or find objectionable. But it's like, it really goes. I mean, it's like I'm a person that doesn't really buy into the concept of free will necessarily. So like for me, it's easy to look at it and go like, well, like this is a machine that's operating, independent of it, the person's will or desire. Like meaning like, he seems to be unwell. I'm not trying to diagnose him from afar. I think he's spoken about the diagnosis that he's received plenty of times, so it's not a surprise. And so like, it's easy to just say, well, this guy's a jerk, or he's a maniac, or he's whatever. But like, does he really bear responsibility for it? I don't know. He's an adult.
Mhm.
He has all the resources in the world, but I don't like. It's hard for me to hold him personally responsible. But also, like, I'm not married to him. I'm in a relationship. I'm not like connected with him in a way that it affects me personally.
Well, and
Yeah.
to circle back to something we said jokingly at the beginning, like this period where he's off the deep end and critics don't like his music anymore, his music has been more popular than any other person's music. That's also around the time that he's made like $1 billion fashion empire. Like he hasn't stopped succeeding despite all of this. And I don't even mean that in like a glib 21st century media way to be like, well, you might hate Paris Hilton, but you're talking about Paris Hilton. So who's really winning the Paris Hilton war? I mean, like in old terms, he continues to win on like his standards.
Yeah. It's
yeah. I I want to kind of make sure we have time to talk about a few other people who appear in this, especially in the third piece. Okay, so like Rick Rubin. Rick Rubin appears in voice only.
Yeah.
Did he get drafted? Did he get drafted in your guys' rock doc talking head draft? Or
David, did you take Rubin? Is Rubin on your squad?
I think he was. I think he was left on the board.
Left on the board,
as
okay.
I recall.
Yeah.
But he was definitely on the board. Who like at one point Kanye's in.
This is his second appearance in a film in the Rock Doc cinematic universe with Petty.
Yep.
Right. Yes. Yeah. In Petty, he appears in full beard.
Yes.
Here we just get the voice
in full Rubin.
It's good. In full Rubin. Yeah. Here, like Kanye is on the phone with him. From Kanye's place in Wyoming. This is probably 2020 or 21, and like Rick's gonna come out and like check out some music that Kanye was playing, and Kanye's like, no, you should come to the ranch and stay and like hang out or whatever, and like. And then, so Rick's like, all right, well, let me just kind of check my schedule. That's fine. And then Kanye goes off on this thing about the word excited. Oh, yeah, Rick says, I'm excited.
I'm excited about this project.
Kanye, right, I'm excited about this project. And Kanye gives him this whole lecture about how you shouldn't say excited. Because excited is like if I said I was giving you a new airplane. Wait, hold on, a new car. He like ratchets down from an airplane to a car. And it's across the street. You might get so excited that you run across the street and get hit by a car going to get the car. But if you're energized, that's different. Like, and it makes no sense.
Yeah.
And Rick's like, yeah, man, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I love to learn,
I love to learn.
I love to learn.
And it's just like so pandering. I don't know. How would you describe it? It was rough.
I mean, do we know if he showed up? Because I think I would.
We don't know.
I think I would come up with an excuse, like, yeah, I'm not going to hang out with him. We're parsing excited with excited with energized.
I tried to explain this in the office today to somebody who hadn't watched the movie, and didn't go over well. Went over like a lead balloon. But yeah, I think Rubin does come across as pandering in his response, and I think partially he comes across as like full of shit in his I'm really excited. And maybe, just maybe, that's actually what Kanye is reacting to.
Yeah, I could see that. I think that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, all he does is, I mean, I don't know. Rick Rubin, I guess he produced Wildflower, so, whatever. But yeah, it seems like he just kind of gets very close to these really highly creative people and just talks to them in a soft cadence, a soft tone, and just they just respond to it. And he just says, yeah, take that out of your record. Just take it out. And that's like what he does. And he's like a music producer.
He's like, what if there was one less? What if there was one less instrument on this track? Wouldn't that make it sound more vulnerable?
They call him the great
under the bridge downtown, Anthony.
They call him the great reducer. He's the great reducer.
Yeah,
that's what
I mean, look, I will say he's done a lot of great records, and also his 3-2-1 series with McCartney, where it's just him and Paul McCartney like talking about the Beatles for 4 hours or whatever, is awesome. And Rick really stays out of the way and just makes it about Paul and just asks the right questions. So I'm not knocking the guy.
I can't deny
this is not a good moment for him.
I can't deny that virtually every great musician who I love seems to respect him completely and admire him.
Yep.
So there's that, but I can't personally help but think that he's like half full of shit, and that Kanye sees it the way I see it in at least some way.
Yeah.
Yes, Kanye off his meds ranting is somehow making more sense than Rick Rubin
Yes.
being calm and speaking.
You know how I love to learn. Like, what a fucking insufferable thing to say in any context. You know how I love to learn. It's just.
I think my 5-year-old would call me on that.
Yes, it's insufferable.
Knock it off, Dad.
Yeah.
Also
making his. I was going to say also making his second Rock Docs appearance is Justin Bieber.
Yeah, secret hero of Rock Docs. When Justin Bieber shows up, it's chill. I mean, Justin Bieber is great in the Billie Eilish documentary, and I mean, just a sweet, lovable person. Here, you get less of him. He's hanging out, basically sitting around the studio in Wyoming while a Mifune samurai movie is playing. I think it's Seven Samurai, but I'm not 100% sure. Japanese samurai movie heads can correct me. But he's just hanging out. You see him singing a little bit, but yeah, he's just kind of chilling. He's like, Kanye's just going off on rants, and Bieber is just kind of sitting there.
Well, the most amazing.
Letting it wash over.
Yeah.
No, I mean the most amazing part. Kanye gets on. He's just had his abortion rant during his ill-fated presidential campaign, and he spins himself up into hysteria, talking about it again, about why people misinterpreted it. And Bieber is just like on the couch in front of him, in the foreground of the shot. The only other person in Coodie's shot is Bieber, as Kanye is just ranting about abortion. And you can tell that Justin Bieber in this situation would like to be absolutely anywhere else than in front of Kanye, listening to him rant about abortion on camera,
being filmed,
filmed, and he's just looking straight forward. And I stopped looking at Kanye and just looked at Justin Bieber, and you can just tell he's just sitting there being like, just be chill, look straight forward. Just be chill, look straight forward. Be chill, look straight forward. And he doesn't crack at all.
Doesn't Bieber have the pull to say like, hey, can you cut the camera? I don't want to be on this. Like somehow he does not have that authority in this space.
Yeah. I mean, it's like that's his thing, is that he's like, I'm going to be around and like, it will not be an issue. Like Justin Bieber's presence in this whole situation is not going to be one of your problems, Kanye. And people want him around because of it.
I want more incidental Justin Bieber in my.
I hope that continues to be a running theme through this series.
He'll be back.
It's a beautiful thing. Who else?
He'll be back.
Yeah, he's hurt. There's no doubt.
We're not done with Justin.
Maybe I should have. Can we draft him in the? Not really a talking head, but just a hanging out guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Who else stood out for you, Nick? There's so many people in this thing.
Well, as a person who's been fascinated with at least the earlier part of the documentary, the Dame Dash performance, and this is extraordinary. For people that are interested in the Rockefeller story, I'd recommend check out the documentary Backstage. That shows basically the pre-Blueprint era of Rockefeller Records. It's really an interesting document that it's basically follows a tour with DMX, Jay-Z, Method Man, and Redman as they do the first arena tour around America. And it's like this documentary where maybe it doesn't hang together as a great film all the time, but it just has moment after moment of just great stuff. And also the, Fade to Black Jay-Z documentary about the Black Album and the Madison Square Garden concert, his final concert. But yeah, Dame Dash is just a fascinating character in hip hop. And
who is Dame Dash? For those of us who are,
Yeah, so Dame Dash is a guy from Harlem who basically links up with Jay-Z in the mid 90s, and they start Rockefeller Records, which is centered around Jay-Z, and they try to sign a bunch of guys who never really work out. I don't know, Andy, were you guys at lacrosse practice in high school listening to a lot of Freeway? I don't know.
No, Freeway did not make it. Did not
Freeway
displace Mobb Deep in the
PD Crack.
PD Crack.
Some PD Crack in this.
Didn't hit. Memphis Bleak, who's actually grew up like in the apartments that Jay-Z grew up in, and
the Marcy projects.
Yeah, so none of those guys work out. I guess Ja Rule's sort of loosely involved. I don't know, but Dame Dash is this guy who becomes a mogul or presents himself as a mogul the whole time, and it all falls apart in the early aughts, right after Kanye releases College Dropout. Kanye's the only signing they ever really make that does anything, and they have Jay-Z and Dame Dash have a falling out. Jay-Z basically buys out the other partners in Rockefeller, or Def Jam buys them out, and then Jay-Z becomes the president of Def Jam after his first retirement. So yeah, Dame Dash he's a very charismatic person, and he holds Kanye back. It seems like, he doesn't respect him as a rapper. Kanye basically has to do a lot of legwork just to get his music with his rapping featured on it out there. He struggles he tries to get with MTV to have the You Heard It First show paying attention to him, and
all that stuff
Dame
that
Dash,
you would imagine the label does, and this is actually him hustling to do it. And I think they even say, I can't remember who it is, maybe you remember, that they say that they were expecting when Jay-Z brought them the record finally that it would be some novelty thing that would have featuring spots on every track.
It would be like the
Right.
Chronic. It would be like they thought he would. And I think Kanye's fear, I think he says it in the documentary, but his fear is that they just signed him to Rockefeller so they would keep him close and he could keep producing these amazing beats, but they didn't really see him as a rapper. And if he did make an album, it would be sort of like the Chronic, where it's his album, but it's featuring other Rockefeller artists.
Yeah.
And Kanye's like, no, that's not what it's going to be. And he put out a classic.
And
I don't know.
The weird thing about the Dame Dash thing is, like, you get 2 episodes of Dame Dash just ignoring Kanye and not giving him his due. And then, like, knowing this history to some extent, you know that there was this breakup between Dame Dash and Jay-Z. Kanye and Jay-Z continue to collaborate. And then fast forward to part 3, and it's like 2020, and there's Dame Dash just hanging out with Kanye. It's never explained what he's doing.
Doesn't look great. Doesn't look
grizzled
good.
Old Dame Dash is just hanging out. Like, Kanye, in a weird way, like, doesn't seem to burn bridges. Like, for all of his aggressiveness, like, he keeps people around him. Like, you see in the early days, Rhymefest, this like other Chicago rapper, boom, he's still there hanging out like 20 years later. Kid Coodie or Cuddy or whatever, like, he's with Kanye from like the 808s days, like straight through to today. Like
JIV, Old School Ice Gree.
All these people, and Coodie too. I mean, I think they probably all have a little bit of the Coodie story themselves, where like Kanye will ice him out for a while or just kind of forget about him and then bring him back. But they never. But yeah, it's kind of. I mean, I'm sure there's people that Kanye has burned bridges with and never connected with again. But it is kind of interesting that like he'll have this tension, but he does on some level recognize that there's an importance and a value to these people that are just part of his life for so long. And I think near the end of the movie, you see that with his dad. I mean, you never see his dad in the movie.
His dad doesn't like feature into the Kanye story in any way like his mom does, right?
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, right near the end of the movie, you see Kanye like in a car talking to his dad on the phone, and his dad's just like asking like, "Are you doing okay?" Like, this is during Kanye's episodes.
Remember those bowls, Dad? Remember those bowls? Not at that house, the other house.
Yeah, the bowls.
Yeah, Kanye's talking about like the other house in the Dominican Republic by the beach where there was bowls, and Kanye goes to see.
Dad's like, yeah, they were bowls. Yeah, I don't know. They were
he goes to see this ceramic artist in San Francisco. Like, he jumps on a plane, flies to San Francisco to see the work of this ceramicist, and Kanye is talking about how it's so relaxing, and he brings his dad like on FaceTime to like show him what's happening. And like part of that is all about, I mean, a thing in this movie that's kind of another undercurrent of his career is like in the beginning, you hear about Kanye saying like he wants to be the best dressed rapper, and it's kind of like one of these joke silly things that Kanye talks about in the early days, and then it ends up being true, and he becomes this like very successful fashion producer and really just iconic person in terms of the world of graphic design. He's working with these incredible artists, whether it's Virgil Abloh or Haruki Murakami, the Japanese artist that he goes and visits at one point. Like, he sees something in these physical objects and the design that other people don't see. And again, it's kind of like just like he's dismissed as a rapper first because he's a producer. Like, he's dismissed as for his visual aesthetic, I think, in a way. He sees that, I think, as important a part of his what he's doing as his music. And I think that's actually kind of ties in, Andy, to what we were talking about with the Billie Eilish doc too, where her visual aesthetic is so important, and I don't think it gets regarded or respected in the same way.
Yeah. I'll say the Dame Dash, the scene where Kanye's at his own party talking shit about Rockefeller not putting their weight behind the release, that Dame Dash walks into the middle of the speech. That's I mean, top 2 or 3 moments in this movie.
Iconic.
We're listing a lot that are going to have to be first ballot inductees into the Rock Doc Hall of Fame, but that one really gets there. That's a short list.
All right, I know we're.
I want to say
we're going along, but Andy, go ahead.
We got to get back to Coodie. I think we may have. So I'll say a couple things about Coodie that I picked up. One is he apparently is like almost as close with meth as he is with Kanye. Him
really?
And like so close that he could
Method Man,
not the
drug,
Method Man. Yeah. That and I don't know if Chike, I listened to an interview with Chike where he was talking about this, and I don't know if there was a moment in the movie that I missed, or if this is just some other footage that's out there. But apparently, there's some footage of Coodie and Method Man talking to each other, where it's very clear that they have a really close personal relationship. And Chike mentioned it as like it's not like this is the only person that Coodie had a close enough relationship to that this is his one ticket to do a documentary on. He could have done a Method Man documentary in 2000 if that's what he wanted to do. He chose Kanye out of his own awareness of like how great Kanye was. He like made a decision as a person with options. Now, I mean, Method Man was very famous by 2000, so it would have been a totally different movie. But like, if he just wanted a shortcut to like making an esteemed documentary, Method Man would have been a much easier sell for basically any studio than Kanye West at that point.
Wouldn't have taken 20 years.
Would not have taken 20 years. That's the other thing is, Coodie initially he wanted to make this movie after they won the Grammy. The first,
like in 2005 or whatever.
Yeah, he was ready to go then, and Kanye told him later that he said no. He came up with some other reasons, but Kanye has confided in him now that he was still too insecure to have people see how the real him, how much he had struggled. So that's why it didn't come out then. The only other thing I want to say is, in terms of Nick, your point about these guys are real filmmakers. Coodie and Chike made like apparently a good. I haven't seen it. You did, Nick, but they made a 30 for 30 documentary, Benji, about a high school basketball player, who was allegedly destined for greatness in the early 80s, who was shot and killed while he was still in high school. A movie called Benji. So like, this is not just like some old Kanye pal with a camera who was had the luck of being in the right place at the right time. He's a real artist in his own right.
Yeah, this ends like a real movie. It's like it's a sad ending. I don't think it's uplifting. It's uplifting when he's like being raised up out of the stadium in Atlanta, but I think it's a real somber ending. Like, we don't really know how this is going to play out.
Well, I want to talk about the religious aspect of the movie because it's so strong through the whole movie, and like that's not my thing. So like, it's a little hard for me to relate, but like, both Kanye and Coodie the entire time are constantly talking about God and Jesus. And it's not like a bit,
No.
Clearly this is like very important for them. Kanye, one of his first songs is Jesus Walks. And then like later on, 20 years later, when he's doing these Sunday services and he does like Jesus is King, like a whole album of gospel music, people are like, where did this come from? It's like, didn't you listen to like his first song? Like, this is not a surprise, guys. Yeah. And Coodie just constantly is talking about, in this and in interviews, about this is all God's plan, these people are watching over me, and I mean, it's clearly a very sincerely held religious belief. And as somebody who's not in that camp, it's hard to relate to. Like, it's just hard. It was harder the first time. I think the second time I kind of like got on their level, but I I don't know if you guys struggle with dealing. It's same thing with kind of listening to gospel music even sometime where I'm like, this music is great, but like I'm not like the message isn't hitting me in the way that it's supposed to in a weird way. I don't know. Am I just weird that way?
I don't think so. I found that like to me the it was most moving in the like playing with who is the he that Coodie is referring to in his closing description of how Christ has Kanye's future in his hands, and there's like a long shot of just a cross, a large oversized cross, and he's talking about how it's all in God's hands at this point, and he's saying he, but I think you can rewatch that whole section and think about he as Kanye, that like Kanye, that Coodie, that the film works with Kanye as a Christ figure, not as like a servant of Christ. And I don't think Coodie intended it that way because he's a very religious person. I think he would think that was probably sacrilegious. But I think it is nonetheless interesting that I think that works. That I think there's an interpretation of that holds up, and that was on my mind while I was listening. So that was what I was thinking of, rather than like, well, I don't really believe in any of this shit, so I'm not getting a lot out of this part of it.
Yeah,
not quite going that far,
so
but I'm just saying.
I was going a little bit more like sophomore English major shit. But so I don't know, that was how I saw it, and well, I don't think that's how Coodie intended it. I thought it was nonetheless interesting that it worked out that way.
Well, yeah, I mean, Kanye is always playing with the Christ thing, where it's it sounds like he thinks of himself as a Christ in some of the songs. There, he talks about his ego or explores his ego, and then I thought it was really interesting that they were talking about the Jesus is King era and how people were questioning whether or not this is his attempt to get like the black churches back and recover from the Trump stuff, and was it genuine? And I don't know, he's the whole time he's been saying that this is gospel music. The whole thing is gospel music. Life of Pablo, that that ultra light beam or whatever I think it's called, that the first track on that one is he uses Kirk Franklin as he's on that track, and he's a massive gospel artist. It's I have a hard time with that one. I'm not a super religious person. I've listened to a lot of the Coodie interviews that he's done since this, and whenever he's asked a tough question, it's kind of like, this is all God's plan. I don't want to answer this. And I listened to the Rolling Stone podcast they just did, the Rolling Stone podcast, where they had those guys on, and it's I never can tell if they're deflecting tough questions or if
like that's literally his earnest response to it.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's like there's a certain type of person who is religious, and they seem to assume that everybody else is or is on their level. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just like that's the world that they're exposed to. I think that's true about a lot of things, but religion is one of those. Like there's people who have one political belief and they assume everybody agrees with them. They'll just stop you in the street and talk about it, assuming you're on their level. And so the way he speaks, it's not like he's saying like, "Hey, dummy, this is God's plan." Like you know what I mean? Like, don't you see? It's like, well, it's almost like we all know this is God's plan.
Right,
like,
right.
It's very much
like, what are you interrogating? Like,
yeah, right.
Yeah, like, yeah. So
are you asking detailed questions about the sermon? It's the sermon. You're supposed to just let it wash over you.
Yeah. That's how it kind of comes off, and it's kind of interesting. It just like really reflects where he's coming from, and in that sense, I think it's it's certainly sincere. There's no question about it from his perspective, but it does kind of give a little bit of distance if you're not part of that tribe. All right, so Nick, our famous last words. If somebody's not particularly a Kanye fan or doesn't know a whole lot about Kanye or hip hop or whatever, and just has 4.5 hours and a Netflix subscription and wants to watch something, would you recommend this just as a entertaining long evening of television?
Oh, absolutely. I think that it's showing what this guy came from and what this guy aspired to do at the early stages. I think look, it's tough to be a Kanye fan. Okay. You know, I understand it's hard to be there for him now. And, you know, I'm the type of person where if he says anything, 6 people text me and they say, what's up with your guy? And it's like, you know, it's hard out here, but, no, but I think this is a good,
that's a different mid 2000s rap song.
Yeah. But this is a good document. I think it's important to see somebody of this level of talent and see where it starts and the drive. And I don't even think you have to like him that much or like his music that much to really see what this story is really about. And it's about somebody who has belief in themselves and just doesn't stop. And I think everybody can kind of watch that and get something from it. And I was blown away by it. I was really blown away. I'm glad I watched it, and I hope other people see it, especially now, since while this is all happening, he's still in the news. He's still relevant for reasons that I think are kind of lame, but you know, I hope people can see where this all started and go back to his body of work that is spectacular. You know, I had a question for you guys. Like, do you think this would be more? Would this have been as effective if they had just dropped it like a normal Netflix release, just dropped all 4.5 hours? Or did you like the living with it for 3 weeks? Because I enjoyed texting with you guys during the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, like I said, I had actual water cooler conversations at work about this movie in 2021. It was,
I loved
it. It was great. It was like the experience that I guess working people had during when Sopranos was on back when I was in high school and college.
I think everybody seems to have come around on that the like early Netflix strategy of dropping everything at once was cool, but now like most people seem to like things to come out, you know, one episode at a time, and so I'm on board with that. So Andy, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I unqualified yes. I think virtually anyone who likes. I don't even think you really have to like rock docs to like this. I think it's just a fantastic story, a very interesting person, a confounding person in some ways, and really well made, well told. Use of music is incredible. You get a lot of music in it. I got really no hesitations. The one thing I have that I don't like about it is my policy of not following Kanye's travails in tabloids has been interrupted by this movie, and that I liked the movie so much that when Kanye started coming through my feeds for the first time in 10 years, I started reading that stuff again, and I do not like it. I really preferred not knowing or caring about any of that stuff that was going on in his life. So I need to get back to ignoring all that stuff. But yes,
you've eaten from the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah, that's right.
And Coodie will get that reference. You guys might not, being heathens, but Coodie and I are down. All right, yeah. I mean, I think any 4.5-hour documentary is, for some people, going to be a tough hang if you're not like already kind of bought in on the thing. But if you're willing to give it that chance, it's got so many great moments. It's really well put together. I mean, I'll just single out one moment that we didn't talk about, which is this like. Kanye, one of his early famous songs is called Hey Mama, where it's a tribute to his mother. And there's a scene with like Kanye and his mom, Donda, like in her little kitchen in her apartment. And they're rapping the song together. Like she's memorized the song that he wrote about her as a tribute to her. And like she knows every word. And they are just both smiling and beaming. And it is the most beautiful thing. Like I was, I've just been listening to that song on repeat. And if I could take that clip, that like 3-minute clip from the movie, and just have it on repeat, like on a little corner of my screen for the rest of the time, I feel like I'd be happy.
Be a happier person. Yeah.
It's just so heartwarming and beautiful. And you didn't expect that, like you don't expect that, type of emotion in a documentary about Kanye West. And there was just so much there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was dope. We liked it, I think, is the bottom line. So thanks to Kanye superfan and Rock Dog superfan Nick McCann for I don't think Andy and I could have done half as good of a job with this without your insight.
He really was our Sherpa, even behind the scenes throughout the last 3 weeks. He's really giving us watch points in each episode to key in on.
May you all have a Nick McCann to guide you through your
genius
journey. My wife can attest to this. I'm used to being at parties and having people like leave the conversation going, "Oh, Nick's talking about Kanye again." Like, so thank you. I feel seen by Rock Docs. Thank you for giving me this place. I don't, thank you for giving me the platform to.
Now I feel guilty that I talked as much as I have. I should have just.
Oh no!
You could have recorded your own, like you have a podcast.
Yeah, that's
you didn't need us at all.
I know. I've probably talked about it on my baseball podcast.
Yeah. Anyway, the Kept Faith is great. And Nick, I don't know, where can he be found? If people want to talk to you about Kanye, other than just some party with Liz?
At Nicholas_McCann. That's a Kanye safe zone if you want to get into it.
2 C's, 2 N's in McCann.
Yeah.
Yes. And we are Rock Docs. We're at Rock Docs Pod on the various places. Rate and review and give us all those nice things. And may you have the love in your life that Donda had for Kanye. And with that, thanks for listening to Rock Docs.